Okay, so the US Constitution was written by us, the people, in order to give us like a little guide to run the country. And within it, we included things that would affect us anywhere from social issues within the country to economic issues, and more specifically, foreign issues. That's what we're going to talk about during this. And all of this stuff can be found in the preamble. It just gives like a little list of things that the Constitution will accomplish, and those include the forming of a more perfect union, the establishment of justice, and to ensure domestic tranquility, and it'll also provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and hopefully secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And all this stuff really relates well to foreign policy. So what is foreign policy? Well, simply put, it's, let's say, the relationship that the U.S. would have towards another country concerning anything from environmental issues, foreign aid, or war or trade, anything like that. And the people that we'd be dealing with can be either nations or states. Nations would be the people who are based off an undefined characteristic that could be something like religion, race, gender, whether they're Muslim or Christian, or male or female. And states would be, those are just countries with defined geographic borders, and they actually have a government set up, and most likely they're going to have an economic structure that we can work with. So over the course of history, the U.S. has actually had quite a few types of foreign policies, and the first one that we held was isolationism, because we were just a baby country. We wanted to stick our nose out of everybody else's business and remain relatively self-sufficient and on our own, and that lasted from the 1770s to the 1820s. And then after that, from the 1820s to the 1890s, we changed to a policy of military isolationism, but economic interventionism. And then once again, we changed following the 1890s and held this policy up until the 2000s. It was actually a policy of military and economic interventionism. And that included everything from World War I to World War II and the fall of communism up until today, where to present, towards the ends of the 2000s, 9/11 happened. And we all know what happened there. And this is where we held a policy for the first time in actually our history of being military and economic preemption. So if you haven't guessed it by now, the guy that I've been drawing is actually President Bush. And he's on this slide for two reasons. First is that preemption occurred under him. That's when we changed to that type of foreign policy, because he was in office when the attacks on 9/11 happened. The second reason has to do with what his role in the key decision-making in foreign policy is. A lot of people today will still blame him and say, oh, President Bush started the war in Iraq because he declared war. I myself remember watching him on TV saying that he was going to declare war on Iraq. But there are a lot of key decision makers that are involved in foreign policy. And the first is, while we're on the subject, the president. Now, just because the president isn't given the power to declare war doesn't mean he's a part of any of the decision making that's to do with foreign policy. He's actually given a few roles, and one of those is actually specifically mentioned in the Constitution as being his role as commander-in-chief, which means that he's given control over our armies if he needs to make like tactical decisions or anything regarding foreign policy. He'll have that title. And then the second thing that he does that's not specifically mentioned is his being a diplomat. Now, he's the main guy people look at to represent the United States, and if he needs to go out and make decisions regarding any kind of social issues or anything that we need to deal with another country, he'll be the one to go out and have a part in those talks. Alright, so next we're going to talk about those guys on Capitol Hill. Just like the president, they're also given a lot of say when it comes to being foreign policy, making them another set of key decision makers. Now, the president is who we look to whenever we have problems with the nation, socially, economically, but Congress actually has a lot of decision-making power up their sleeves too. They're given the power of the purse and the ability to declare war. Now, power of the purse means that they get to decide where money is spent. And when it comes to declaring war, they're the only ones alone that can declare war. And if, like we mentioned before, Obama wanted to send in troops for that 60-day period, they're the ones that get to decide if they get to stay there or not.
time in this institution.
So as Professor Lee would describe them, these rich white guys in Congress get to make all the decisions and the laws that would have to do with foreign policy. And this can be another check on the president, actually, because if he likes a type of policy that he wants to enact, he could suggest that to Congress, and they in turn can just let that slide on the table or vote it down if they don't like it. And then on the other side, if President Obama just suggests something that he wants done, and he actually goes through with enforcing it, Congress can make a law that can make it harder for him to enforce what he wants to get done. So that in itself is another check. And they're the ones who also get to decide through their votes. They'll go to like a majority or a 2/3 vote, whichever the case that they're dealing with. They're the ones who get to vote on whatever needs to be enacted or enforced at the time. And if they don't like it, it's not going through. So they have to. That goes back to the president. He has to decide if he wants to try to overpower that. And if they do like it, they'll vote on it. They'll vote for it, and it'll become law. And back to the power of the purse again, that's actually a really, really big responsibility that Congress is given, and actually towards their benefit. Because let's say the president wants to enact something that he thinks could help towards foreign policy, and that Congress doesn't like it, they don't have to spend their money the way that the president wants, so his plan isn't going to go through. You can't really talk about Congress without mentioning the fact that they are part of the legislature, which means they get to create laws. And that's what the little guy on the screen is. He's a bill. We all know that bills are created and then sent to Capitol Hill, and he's going to become a law someday. Yeah, but those laws actually have a lot of influence over the foreign policy between us and other countries, because they deal with things like sanctions, foreign aid, trade, and human rights, which are all wrapped up within foreign policy. And legislators are left with that task of creating that stuff. With regard to treaties, Congress and the president actually work together on this. It's most likely that the president is going to be the one to suggest a treaty that needs to be formed between our country and theirs. But Congress is given a little bit of power here too, because they have to approve this treaty by a 2/3 vote on whether they want to go into that kind of relationship with that country or not. And because of the fact that you need a vote, Congress can kind of slow down that process and bog it down, and that'll kind of make the president think twice about it, and he'll want to, amend it a little bit to make it a little easier for them to pass. And then if they like the changes he's made, they'll pass it. Then a treaty is formed. Foreign policy. Okay, so that was Congress and the president, which are both key decision makers when it comes to foreign policy. And the reason I spent so much time talking about those two is because I think that's really the most important thing there is to learn when you're talking about foreign policy, because those are guys actually making decisions. And it's funny how they kind of interact with each other. But they're only of two that I mentioned out of the ones that Professor Lee that provided us with. And those other few were the State Department, Defense Department, the Homeland Security Department, and the National Security Council. And right now I'm drawing the CIA, because I just wanted to have them because they're pretty cool, they're like ninja spies. They're the ones who go out and do all the dirty work to get the information on the other countries that we need to know about. And the last thing that Professor Lee would want you to know is how political scientists explain the past and predict the future of international relations. And those fall into three things that he provided us, which were realism, pluralism, and globalism. And you can tell by the slides what each of these have to deal with. And that's pretty much the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Now it's time for a review.
Never gonna give you